recently opened my Facebook page, and the first thing that popped up was an interview by the BBC with a professional dog trainer who was warning against woke dog training methods, claiming that they were to blame for the increasing frequency of dog bites in the UK. And with dog bites increasing year on year, this is a genuine and valid concern. But it got me thinking, what exactly is woke dog training? And is it really to blame? In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the facts, and I'm going to be discussing my own opinion on this topic as a professional dog trainer. And I'm also going to be digging into what I think the real solution is to the increasing frequency of dog bites in the UK. If we haven't met before, hi, I'm Amelia Steele, an award-winning multi-certified dog behaviour specialist. I spent the last 6 years working with dogs full-time, training both pet dogs and working directly with shelters all across the world. So if you love dogs and you want to see more in-depth videos on dog behaviour, training and rescue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Section 1. What is woke dog training? When I first saw this article, I'll admit, I did laugh a little bit, because on the face of it, it doesn't really make much sense. The term woke is generally accepted to mean to be aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, but specifically in the context of racial and social justice issues. So already, this can't really apply to a dog training methodology. The issue though is that this term has been appropriated by common media and is often just thrown around as an insult. So I'm pretty certain that this trainer was not using the term woke in its original definition. So what exactly do they mean? Well, I did investigate a little bit further, and although they have now taken down this interview, it seems as though they were referring to force-free or positive training methods. Now, if you're not familiar with the terms force-free or positive training, they're not really used to describe training methods. Instead, they describe a code of ethics that a trainer would stick to when training dogs. Force-free or positive dog training essentially means that the trainer actively rejects the use of aversive tools or any training technique that actively causes harm or discomfort or pain to the dog. These techniques exist in opposition to traditional training that essentially only utilizes punishment and pain and discomfort, and balanced training, which utilizes a mix of rewards-based methods, but still uses those aversives and punishment-based methods as well. I'm going to be referring to aversive tools or aversives throughout this video, so it's important that you understand what they are. Now essentially, an aversive tool or method is one that is actively designed to cause pain or discomfort as a way to discourage behaviour. This includes tools like shock collars, prong collars, slip leads and choke chains, and even head collars. It also applies to training techniques like physically correcting a dog, jabbing them or pushing them, and even things like spraying them with water. Again, it's things that are designed to stop a behaviour by applying a physical punishment or causing discomfort to the dog. Now the issue is, force-free dog training is really misunderstood by people on the outside of it. As a force-free trainer myself, I can share exactly what it is, what it's not, and what people misunderstand about it, which is really important to know if we want to discuss how that impacts the risk of dog bites. Which brings me to my next section. Section 2. What actually is force-free dog training? So we've established that force-free training, as a code of ethics, actively rejects the use of pain and discomfort. And of course, a huge part of that comes from empathy. We don't want to hurt the dogs that we love. But that's where most people's understanding of it ends. And that in itself can cause some pretty big misconceptions. Misconceptions like, we don't have boundaries, and it doesn't work for all dogs. And as this article stated, that our lack of discipline causes more harm than good. So before I give my own personal opinions of this, let's break down exactly what force-free training actually consists of. Principle number 1, teaching dogs the skills they need. The first and simplest principle of force-free dog training is that we set our dogs up for success and teach them the skills that they need to thrive. We like to focus on teaching the dog what to do, where traditional training would say, well, I don't want my dog to pull on the lead, so I'm going to correct them for pulling. We would say, well, I'm going to teach my dog how to walk nicely, and that it's worth walking nicely. Principle number 2, looking beyond obedience. We also acknowledge that not every behaviour is an obedience issue. We understand that behaviour can be caused by a whole host of things, whether it's an emotion like fear, anxiety, or excitement, or something else underlying like pain or a health issue, or even a neurological condition. Now, traditionally, training just looked at what we call the quadrants of operant conditioning, which I will save for another video because it's a long explanation and we don't need to break it down right now. But it's essentially learning via consequence. If you do this, then you get this. It works by either providing a favourable outcome for a behaviour, for example, your dog sits, they get a treat so they want to do it more, or by providing a negative outcome for a behaviour, for example, providing a correction on a slip lead, so that your dog doesn't want to do that behaviour again. Now, as force-free trainers, we only use 50% of the quadrants, because the other two involve applying physical corrections or removing physical discomfort, and that's not how we work. So a common argument against force-free training is that we're limiting ourselves because we only have access to 50% of the training techniques. But here's the thing, traditional training focused solely on the quadrants. We understand that it's only one part of a much broader toolkit that is available to us. We aim to look beyond the quadrants because, again, it's only a small part of behaviour. And I promise that we will dive into the quadrants in a future video because they are super important to understand. But for today, we probably don't have enough time. So that's pretty much what you need to know. Principle 3, addressing the root cause. So as I mentioned earlier, we acknowledge that not all behaviour is caused by a lack of obedience, and that sometimes behaviour is just a part of the picture and is often a symptom of a much deeper issue. As force-free trainers, we acknowledge that we have to identify and address the why behind behaviour if we want to make genuine, lasting change. For example, as somebody that works with a lot of reactive dogs, I know that the barking isn't the issue. Sure, it's the reason why people pick up the phone and want to work with me and want to get their dog trained, but it's not the reason why the behaviour is happening. The barking happens because the dog is having an emotional response to something in the environment. They bark because they are scared of other dogs, or they're frustrated that they can't get to other dogs, or they're so excited that they can't control themselves. And if we want to stop the barking, we have to address those feelings. If we ignore those feelings and just focus on the external barking and we try and reward or punish that away, all we're going to do is hide the symptom. We're essentially suppressing that behaviour, but the feeling hasn't gone. So what can actually happen is the behaviour either intensifies or it's going to spill out somewhere else in the dog's life. And it's worth saying that even if addressing the external behaviour gets rid of the unwanted behaviour, suppressing emotions is not a good thing. If there is one thing I have learned in my adult life, it's that when you suppress emotions, they are going to come out somewhere. Now, for some of us, this looks like crying all evening when the goat dies in Jurassic Park. But in dogs, it definitely doesn't look like that. It looks like increased destructive behaviour, chewing, separation anxiety, chronic stress, and even things like increased aggression. It can also impact their health. And remember, no amount of physical punishment can make your dog feel better about something, no matter what the internet dog trainers tell us. And if you genuinely love your dog and care about their welfare, which in my experience most people do, you're not going to want them to just shut up and suffer in silence. You're going to want to help them and fix that emotion and fix why they are feeling bad. And if you need more incentive, it's important to know that we need dogs to tell us how they feel. Without that communication, we don't get warning signs, and that is exactly how bites happen out of nowhere. Which takes us to section 3, why dogs bite. As I mentioned earlier, all behavior happens for a reason, and aggression is not something you want to be messing around with. So when we're asking ourselves whether or not force-free dog training increases the risk or likelihood of a dog biting, we first need to understand why dogs bite. Let's look at the most common reasons. This is the most common form of aggression that we see in pet dogs, and it's essentially where a dog's communication has been ignored and ignored. They've told us that they are uncomfortable and we're not listening, and it's essentially their last-ditch attempt at getting you to leave them alone. And it's worth saying that there doesn't have to literally be a physical threat for your dog to perceive something as a threat. So it's essentially their boundaries being pushed and pushed and pushed until they reach their tipping point. In my courses, I typically teach people about the canine ladder of aggression, which demonstrates how dogs will escalate through levels of communication before feeling the need to bite. Although it's worth saying that it's not linear. It's not like the dog will progress through each one and give you nice clear warnings. It can jump around and different dogs will escalate at different rates. But again, this type of aggression is generally rooted in fear. Arousal is a dog's alertness level in response to a stimuli. And hyperarousal is a heightened version of that. Hyperarousal is where the dog's body and nervous system overreact and essentially send them into a state of fight or flight. Now, this is a behavior I see all the time, but it's not really that common in homes. Often I see this in young male dogs who have either grown up in the shelter environment or have been at a shelter or a rescue center for an extended period of time. With these dogs, because they've never learned any life skills and they often have a lot of hormones and the shelter environment is stressful, the combination of all of these things can cause them to become really dysregulated and they can resort to biting as a way to cope. I've seen it range from just jumping and mouthing like a puppy would, all the way to some quite serious biting. This type of aggression can be incredibly dangerous, but it is rare to see outside of the shelter environment, although not impossible. Redirection biting happens when a dog is having a very intense reaction to one thing, but they can't access it, so they turn and take it out on whatever's closest to them, whether it's a person or another dog. I see this a lot with reactive dogs, where all of that emotion that they're having towards another dog, that they can't access that dog, so they turn and bite onto the person as a way to deal with all of that emotion. In some cases, we can see a chase and bite response from dogs. This typically happens when a dog has an intense predatory response to something, where they really want to chase something to catch it and kill it. And this response in dogs, if it's encouraged from a young age, can result in dogs who want to and enjoy chasing and biting people. A dog who is in pain or has some kind of underlying health issue is much more likely to bite. It can be a significant contributor when we are looking at aggression cases. And it's also worth knowing that there are also some neurological conditions that can also cause a dog to lash out and bite. So already, when we break all of these down, it's really difficult to see how the addition of aversives would help in any way. As we mentioned earlier, we can't punish away emotions, and we can't use punishment to teach dogs the life skills that they need to cope with the world. And if we're trying to suppress warning signs like barking and growling, we're not actually changing how the dog feels. We're only getting rid of the communication that tells us that the dog is going to bite, but we're still going to end up with that resulting bite. So if we have a dog that no longer gives warnings, that is a dangerous dog. We can also see that the addition of aversives in all of these cases can make things worse. And this isn't just my opinion or my experience. A 2009 study demonstrated that confrontational and aversive training techniques were associated with higher aggressive responses from dogs. They also found that owners reported that dogs responded with aggression in a substantial proportion of cases where aversive methods had been used. In other words, just the presence of aversive methods increased the risk of aggression. In contrast, a 2004 study found that dogs trained with rewards-based methods showed better obedience, whereas the use of punishment-based methods were associated with more problem behaviors, including aggression-related outcomes. We see consistently across studies the correlation between aversive training methods and a higher or increased risk of aggression. So, we've established that aversive training methods increase the risk of biting. So that leads us to section 4. Does force-free training actually increase the risk of dogs biting? Throughout my career, I have had every argument under the sun against force-free training. But the one that always stings the most is the idea that force-free training works to a point, but when it comes to dogs who are aggressive or particularly out of control, that there should be an exception, and that in these cases, aversive tools or harsh punishment is needed to keep these dogs under control. I hear this a lot when people are talking about reactive dogs, and that, well, positive training worked to a point, but there comes a point where you need to be harsh and you need to be strict. And here's why that stings. On a personal level, I have dedicated my life and my career to helping big, difficult dogs, even to the point where a lot of my work at the local shelter is to help the big, bitey dogs to improve their behavior so that we can find them a home. And with great success, I might add. So to have all of that hard work invalidated is always gonna hurt. But outside of my own personal experience, that argument falls apart pretty quickly. Let's take a look. As we've established, punishment typically only intensifies or suppresses a behavior. And in the case of aggression, that is so dangerous. Again, aggression happens for a reason, and when we're working with aggressive dogs, it's our job to identify why they feel that way, why they feel the need to bite, and then to help them feel better so they don't want to bite anymore. And in other cases, we're looking at teaching the dogs the right skills and what to do, so again, they don't feel the need to bite. And if we start slapping aversive tools on these dogs, we're either risking escalating that aggression, or we're going to lose all of our warning signs. We're going to lose all of that vital communication that allows us to de-escalate the situation before the resulting bite happens. So in reality, the more difficult the dog and the higher the risk of aggression, the less we want to be using these aversive tools, because otherwise we're risking our safety. These are the dogs that need force-free training techniques. Otherwise, we're not just risking aggression, we're putting our own safety at risk, and we're creating an active risk to the public. I'll say it again, a dog that gives no warning before biting is a dangerous dog. Another common argument against force-free training is that our lack of willingness to set boundaries creates out-of-control dogs. Traditional trainers will throw around phrases like leadership is love and dogs just need structure to feel happy. I even saw one social media dog trainer claiming that without really strict structure and guidance, that the pressure to make their own decisions will make dogs become anxious and too overwhelmed to cope with life. What is often lacking though is any kind of definition around what structure means, because as a training term, it's vague at best. So I looked into the methods of the trainers who are making these claims, and so much of it centers around very extreme levels of control. Some of these trainers insist that dogs must stay on their place or in their bed all day. Some of them insist that a dog should only walk right next to you on a walk, not in front. And if the dogs don't comply with these rules, then they're met with harsh physical punishments. Things like a pop on a choke chain or a slip lead, or even a shock with an e-collar. In my opinion, these methods are nothing short of abuse, and packaging them up as essential for the dog's well-being and hiding them behind love and care is just a really convenient way to justify that abuse. A 2023 study showed that an animal's ability to make choices and control their own outcomes resulted in higher welfare markers. For reference, welfare markers are things like the animal's health, mental well-being, and behavior. And the higher the score, the happier the dog, generally speaking. And this isn't the only study that has said this. There are tons of studies to back this up, including studies conducted with dogs specifically. What studies also tell us though, is that predictability and a routine in the dog's day decreases their overall stress levels. A 2021 study conducted with shelter dogs found that dogs who had a predictable routine had lower cortisol levels than those that don't. Now on the face of it, these two things sound contradictory. How can a dog have choice and agency, but also structure and routine? Well, that's because they are very different things and can absolutely coexist. A predictable routine is very different to extreme structured control. My goal as a trainer has always been to give dogs the skills they need to exist happily without me needing to tell them what to do all the time. And by doing that, we can allow dogs to have choice and agency throughout their day. The predictability element comes from my behavior being predictable, so I'm not yelling at them 1 minute and then telling them to do something the next. And also giving them predictability throughout the day. We're gonna eat at these times. We're gonna go for a walk at these times. That's where the predictability element comes from. Not extreme control over every little movement that they have. In my book, providing a routine for our dog isn't about very strict timings. It's just about our dog knowing that they are going to get the things that they need throughout the day, and that is something they can rely on. And that is the nuance that I think is so often missed when people look at force-free training from the outside. Again, another common argument is the lack of boundaries. But I find this so funny because of course we create boundaries. It just probably looks different to how society expects boundaries to look. We focus on teaching our dogs what to do. So instead of yelling at our dog for being on the couch, we would teach them to settle in their bed. We also look at boundaries as a flexible thing depending on the person and the lifestyle. My boundaries with my dog will probably look very, very different to somebody else's. Because hey, if I want my dog to sit on the couch or sleep in my bed, that's fine. Someone else might not want those things. And it's down to the individual and how they want to live with their dog as to what boundaries we would set and how we teach them. But again, we focus on teaching the dog what to do, not just yelling at them for doing the wrong things. And in my opinion, that is the literal definition of training. We're training our dogs to do what we want them to do. Correcting a dog for doing anything other than nothing is not training. It's just abuse. And again, the idea that we need aversive tools to create a well-rounded and well-behaved dog falls apart really quickly when we actually look at the evidence. A 2024 study by the Royal Veterinary College found that 82% of pandemic puppy parents had admitted to using aversives to address their dog's behavioural issues. And the study found that these methods not only negatively impacted the dog's welfare, but also that they were poorly effective, and in some cases resulted in more problem behaviours due to the anxiety and fear that these methods cause. So what we actually see when we look at all of the evidence is that the presence of aversives actually correlates to worse behaviour, poorer welfare, and a higher risk of biting, whereas force-free training methods contributed to higher welfare outcomes, better obedience levels, and a lower risk of bites. Thus, we can safely conclude that force-free training does not in fact increase the risk of biting and is not contributing to the increasing bite cases year on year. Section 5. What is actually causing dog bite cases to go up? When I started investigating the data for dog bite cases, I found that there's not actually a whole lot of information available on the cause of these bites. The UK doesn't actually record this information when somebody reports a dog bite. So all I can really do is give my opinion based on the data that is available to me. Now, I really didn't want this to come across as two sides of an argument throwing insults at each other. So what I'm not going to do is what this dog trainer did and start just randomly throwing accusations at the opposing ethical standpoint. What I have done though is I've tried to collect as much data as possible, and I've tried to research through as many studies as I could find so that we can actually get to the bottom of why dog bite cases are increasing. And this is what I did find. If you have a look at these two graphs, the one on the left shows the population growth of dogs in the UK, and the one on the right shows the trend in hospital admissions from dog bites. We can see that the trends in both of these data sets are very similar. Now, obviously correlation doesn't equal causation, but it does seem obvious that the more dogs there are, the higher the risk of you getting bitten. What we can also see is that dog ownership really spiked during COVID, a time where access to training and the ability to socialize a dog was very limited. We know that puppies have a key socialization period between 8 and 16 weeks. So for all of these dogs who grew up in a world that was very, very limited, it's natural that we're going to see an increase in dogs who are fearful of their surroundings and more likely to display aggression towards strangers. Another influence that I'd like to acknowledge is the fallout that happens when we see such a high demand for dogs and puppies. During lockdown, the demand for puppies skyrocketed. And at a time where so many people were worried about the future, worried about their jobs and money, it's natural that we're then going to see people who want to capitalize on that demand. During lockdown, we saw a huge increase in the number of puppies being bought and sold, and specifically we saw an increase in unethical and backyard breeding. Now, what's important to know is that the idea that puppies are a clean slate is a myth. There are so many things that might influence a dog's behavior, but early life experiences, including those that they have at the breeder, as well as genetics, both play a huge role when it comes to the resulting behavior of an adult dog. A 2006 study that looked at working line dogs bred for police and military work found that behaviors including aggression and fear in the parent dogs were more likely to result in those traits in the offspring. So with more people breeding and selling dogs without much thought into their health or behavior, we can see how the result would be an unhealthier population of dogs and an increasing risk of bite cases. I also want to revisit the studies we talked about earlier, because the sad reality is that aversive training techniques are becoming more popular again. And with them being linked to worse and more frequent problem behaviors and a higher risk of aggression, this is a factor we absolutely cannot ignore if we're talking about bite cases. And with dog training being an unregulated industry, anyone can show up at your house and charge you money to train your dog, even if they have no experience and no qualifications. And this is absolutely a field where you do need qualifications. But the other issue is, again, because this is an unregulated industry, qualifications are also unregulated. I see it all the time where somebody sets up their own dog training school where they are training trainers, even though they themselves have never done any qualifications and are using very outdated training techniques. And the issue is, you can mean well and be getting good results, but if you don't understand the impact that your training techniques have on both welfare and the risk of other behavioural issues happening, you could be causing more harm than good. Now, another major issue is the fact that we as a species are really bad at reading dogs. There's a really well-documented effect called the Disney dog effect, which I really want to do a full video on, so keep an eye out for that. But it's essentially a phenomenon where we have all grown up with dogs being portrayed in a very certain way in media. And this portrayal essentially seeps out into how we see dogs in real life. And because we've grown up seeing dogs this way, we end up humanizing dogs and really not understanding any of their communication, because we project all these Disneyfied versions of dog emotions onto them. And when we don't know how to read dogs and we misinterpret their communication, this also really increases the risk of us being bitten. Although this really isn't new, and it's kind of always been the case with dogs. So personally, I don't believe this is contributing to the increasing frequency of dog bite cases. I just think it influences the fact that there are bite cases altogether. So while there's no hard data to suggest exactly why we're seeing more and more dog bites, it's my personal belief, based on the data that we do have, that both increasing populations and the lack of regulation in dog training and dog breeding are all influencing the increasing dog attacks each year. Section 6. What needs to change? I genuinely believe that if we as a society want to live harmoniously alongside dogs, then we need to be doing more around education and regulation. We've lived alongside dogs for thousands of years, but life now looks so different to how it used to look, and we need to accommodate for that. Traditionally, we've done this through training methods that prioritize getting our dogs to obey. And well, if you're not fitting into this life, I'll do everything under the sun to make sure that you change to fit into my life. And we've done this without actually considering behavioural science and the implications of these training methods. We've essentially forced dogs into a life that is really, really unnatural to them, and then got mad at them when they've not behaved the right way. And if we genuinely want things to change, we need to start with education. We as a society need to learn more about what dogs actually need to thrive. And we also need to consider the fact that A lifestyle with dogs is very, very different to a lifestyle without dogs. Instead of just expecting to live our life and have a dog slot into it. Dogs as a species have such different needs to us, and we need to consider that if we want to live alongside them. It shouldn't be the case that we expect to train dogs to tolerate everything. It's just not how training works. The problem is though, is we need education to be accessible. Everybody with a dog should understand what responsible dog ownership looks like. And they should also understand the harm that can be caused when we don't take that responsibility seriously. It's not just pet parents though. We need education to go beyond that. Everyone should learn how to safely coexist in a society where dogs exist. After all, with so many dogs around, it's hard not to come across dogs in your day-to-day life, even if you don't have one. Furthermore, we also need to be educating parents and children on what it means to be safe around dogs. After all, children are at the highest risk of being bitten and actually make up for 50% of dog bite cases, with children under 5 being at the highest risk. So this can't be ignored if we genuinely want to see a decrease in dog bite cases and want to keep our society safe. I also believe that we are well overdue minimum levels of regulation, both in dog training and dog breeding. Dog training education should be regulated, and trainers should be required to have completed a minimum level of education before accepting clients, and especially before taking on serious behavioural cases like aggression. We also need regulation around dog breeding. It shouldn't be the case that anybody who has a dog can just breed and sell puppies. Although this is a whole other can of worms that I will again save for a future video. So, I would love to hear your input. Let me know what you thought of this video, and let me know what your opinions are on the increasing frequency of bite cases. What do you think is causing it? And what do you think we should do to solve it? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more in-depth videos on behaviour, training, and rescue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel.